For 500 years, the name Ravager has been a whisper of pure doom across the star systems. It's a name that's only ever spoken with a shudder of primal fear. In the massive Galactic Concordance database, there's just one entry for the species, Omega-class threat. They're a force of nature, a living engine of chaos that eats worlds and shatters fleets for breakfast. Across 1,000 planets, kids are told stories about the Ravager just to keep them from wandering off into the dark. It's supposed to be a monster of pure, unfiltered violence, and on listening post Epsilon 9, that very monster is currently chasing a dropped spanner across the floor like a house cat. A low, happy growl rumbles in its chest as its claws skitter harmlessly across the durasteel. Its supposed victim, a human named Alex, just watches with a warm smile. He reaches down, scoops the creature up, and tucks it into the crook of his arm. The galaxy's greatest fear immediately starts nuzzling his neck, who's a fluffy little engine of galactic destruction. Alex coos, scratching the spot right behind its armature plates. You are. Yes, you are. The galaxy thought it knew fear, but it had never seen anything like a Ravager. The official records, pieced together from the terrified ramblings of survivors, painted a chilling picture. Ravagers were living weapons, huge creatures of scarred flesh, with serrated claws that could shear through a starship's hull and wild, intelligent eyes that burned with pure malice. They'd appear without warning, strike without mercy, and then vanish, leaving nothing but silence and wreckage behind. They were blamed for the fall of the Tholian outpost on Cygnus X1, the shattering of the Vex Imperium's Grand Armada, and the complete disappearance of colonies in the Veil Nebula. They were phantoms, nightmares made real. The Concordance's top xenobiologists figured they were a species that was simply incapable of anything but aggression, but way out on Epsilon 9. A lonely little station, floating in the forgotten blackness of the outer rim, Alex knew nothing about any of this. His job was to listen. For 20 years, he'd been the only human operator of a deep space sensor array, basically a glorified ear pointed at the endless void. He listened for pirate chatter, stellar anomalies, and distress signals that were usually just echoes from centuries ago. His whole world was the hum of life support and the cold glow of holo displays. It was a quiet, predictable, and profoundly lonely life that all shattered on a Tuesday. A proximity alert, shrill and impossible to ignore, woke him from a light nap. It wasn't a ship. The mass was too small, the trajectory all wrong. Alex guided the station's grapple arms toward the object, a mangled piece of junk that might have been an escape pod once. Just as he was about to toss it into the station's incinerator, a flicker of movement caught his eye. There, tucked into the twisted metal, was a creature. It was small, no bigger than his forearm, and shaking violently. It was covered in dark, matted fur, with what looked like plates of obsidian armor mixed in. A deep, ugly gash ran along its side, and one of its multi-jointed legs was bent at a completely unnatural angle. Its eyes, huge and luminous, locked onto him not with malice, but with pure, palpable terror. Every protocol Alex had ever learned screamed at him to just burn the pod. Unknown biological entity. Potential contaminant. Threat. But as he looked at the wounded, shivering thing, he didn't see a threat. He saw something that was hurt and alone. And in that moment, Alex felt a kinship with it that made no logical sense at all. Ignoring decades of training, he overrode the safety locks and brought the wreckage into the small, sterile cargo bay. He approached it slowly, his hands empty and open. The creature tried to snarl, but it came out as a pathetic whimper of pain. "Easy there," Alex said softly, his voice echoing in the bay. "I'm not going to hurt you." He spent the next hour carefully cleaning its wound and setting its leg with a splint he made from a hydro spanner and medical tape. The whole time, the creature just watched him, its breathing slowly evening out. As he finished, it let out a low, hesitant rumble. Alex placed a hand on its head, feeling the strange mix of fur and smooth armor. It was surprisingly soft under all the grime. "You're not so bad," Alex murmured, a real smile spreading across his face for the first time in years. "Just a little." "Fluffy." He looked at the creature, which blinked slowly, almost content. "Fluffy. I'm calling you Fluffy." The sterile silence of Epsilon 9 was gone, replaced by, "Well, bye Fluffy." The little creature healed with incredible speed, and soon the station became its personal playground. Alex would watch, endlessly amused, as Fluffy would get a running start, slide across the polished floors, and bump harmlessly into a wall, only to shake itself off and do it all over again. It would chase the little red dot from Alex's laser calibrator with a hunter's focus, pouncing with a ferocity that was absolutely comical given its size. Fluffy even started to help when Alex ran diagnostics. Fluffy would sit and watch, tilting its head like it actually understood the complex readouts. One time, Alex was struggling to solder a faulty connection on a nutrient dispenser. Fluffy seemed to sense his frustration, shuffled forward, opened its mouth, and let out a tiny, precise puff of superheated plasma that welded the connection perfectly. Alex just stared, stunned, before bursting into laughter. From then on, Fluffy's plasma breath became his go-to for heating his morning coffee and toasting his nutrient bars just right. Their bond grew into a comfortable and spoken friendship. Alex started talking to Fluffy all the time, narrating his day, complaining about the monotony, and sharing stories of an Earth he hadn't seen since he was a kid. Fluffy would just listen, its head cocked, occasionally letting out its signature purr, a deep, seismic rumble that vibrated through the station and settled a loneliness in Alex's chest he hadn't even realized was so heavy. But while this quiet little domestic scene was playing out, the galaxy was stirring. In the gleaming towers of the Galactic Concordance, the High Security Council was in session. Commander Valerius, a towering insectoid known for his cold efficiency, pointed a slender appendage at a star chart. The energy signature is unmistakable. Valerius' voice clicked, totally flat. An Omega-class entity, a Ravager, has been tracked to this sector. A red circle pulsed on the map, and at its very center was a single, insignificant dot, Epsilon 9. Previous encounters have taught us that inaction is not an option. A full battle group is 3 cycles out. In the interim, we have authorized the highest possible bounty for its neutralization. Every hunter in the sector has been notified. The Concordance saw a monster that needed to be wiped out. They saw a data point, a threat that had to be eliminated. What they couldn't possibly know was that their ultimate weapon was currently asleep on a human's lap, probably dreaming of chasing laser dots. The news came, as most bad news did for Alex, through an official broadcast. A Priority 1 alert overrode everything. His blood ran cold. In 20 years, he'd seen a Priority 1 alert exactly once, and that was for a supernova scare that turned out to be a glitch. This was no glitch. The grim face of a Concordance news anchor filled his main screen. We interrupt this cycle for an urgent galactic security bulletin. An Omega-class Ravager, the same entity responsible for the devastation at the Kahal listening posts, has been positively identified in the Outer Rim. The screen flickered to a grainy security image. A creature, immense and horrifying, was tearing through a blast door like it was tissue paper. It was a blur of claws and armored plates, a literal whirlwind of destruction. It was bigger, scarred, and consumed by a terrifying rage. But the shape was undeniable. The head, the obsidian plates, the limbs. It was Fluffy. A fully grown, impossibly violent Fluffy. Alex felt the air get sucked out of his lungs. He stared at the hologram, his mind refusing to connect the monster on the screen with the small, warm weight currently purring on his knee. He looked down. Fluffy blinked up at him, its big eyes full of nothing but innocent trust. The broadcast went on, detailing the bounty, warning everyone to report any sightings, listing the creature's known abilities. Approach is tantamount to suicide, the anchor said grimly. This species knows no mercy, no compassion, no fear. It is a biological weapon, and it must be stopped. The world just tilted. Fluffy wasn't some stray. It was the galaxy's most wanted, a creature of nightmare and legend. A wave of nausea hit Alex. He could do it. He could send one transmission. Tell the Concordance the Ravager was here. They'd probably call him a hero. He'd be rich. He could finally leave this station, go back to Earth, and live a life he'd only ever dreamed of. All he had to do was betray his only friend. He looked at the creature again. He remembered its terrified eyes in the wreckage. He remembered its clumsy attempts to play, the warmth of its plasma breath on his coffee mug, the comforting rumble of its purr in the lonely, silent nights. This wasn't a monster. This was Fluffy. His choice wasn't really a choice at all. It was pure instinct. With trembling fingers, Alex walked over to the main comms panel. He took a deep breath and shut down the long-range transmitter, cutting himself off from the rest of the galaxy. He looked back at Fluffy, who was now batting playfully at the dust motes in a beam of light. For the first time, Epsilon 9 went completely dark. He had made his stay-so. Alex just pitted himself against the entire galaxy for a creature he barely knows, all because of empathy. What would you have done? Would you have saved yourself? Or would you have protected Fluffy? Let us know in the comments. And if you're enjoying this trip into the unknown, hit that subscribe button for more stories that challenge the cosmos. ND, going dark was a statement, but it was also a flare. In the vast, interconnected web of the galaxy, a sudden silence is as loud as a scream. It took less than a day for someone to notice. A ship, sleek and dark as a shark's tooth, dropped out of hyperspace just outside the station's sensor range. It was the Stiletto, captained by Kalen, a Xylosian bounty hunter with a legendary knack for tracking Omega-class threats. If the Concordance fleet was a sledgehammer, Kalen was a scalpel. A clipped, professional voice crackled over the short-range comms. Listening post Epsilon 9, this is Kalen. I have a warrant for the creature you are harboring. Surrender it. The Concordance is prepared to offer a full pardon and the complete bounty. Refuse, and you'll be classified as a hostile accomplice. Alex's heart hammered against his ribs. He glanced at Fluffy, who was watching the comms unit with a curious head tilt. No deal, Kalen, Alex replied, his voice a lot steadier than he felt, a predictable and foolish response. The voice came back, followed by a jarring thud that shook the entire station. They docked. The hunt was on. Alex wasn't a soldier, but Epsilon 9 was his home. He was the ghost in this machine. He knew every secret passage, every maintenance duct, every system flaw. While Kalen moved through the main corridors like a pro, armed with thermal imagers and kinetic pulse rifles, Alex was a shadow. He rerouted power, plunging whole sections into darkness. He vented harmless coolant gas to mess with Kalen's vision. He used the internal comms to create false sounds, leading the hunter on a wild goose chase. Fluffy seemed to get the game, sticking close to Alex and moving with a silence that shouldn't have been possible. Alex could feel the low, anxious rumble in its chest. He was terrified, but also felt a strange rush. He wasn't just some lonely station operator anymore. He was a protector. The chase ended where it had to, the main cargo bay, a huge, cavernous space filled with dormant machines. Kalen had cut him off, anticipating his move with practiced ease. The hunter stood by the only exit, their rifle aimed not at Fluffy, but right at Alex's chest. Game's over, human, Kalen said, their voice calm and final. You've been resourceful, I'll give you that. But your attachment is a weakness. The creature is valuable. You are disposable. Those words just hung in the air. Disposable. The same word Alex had used for himself in his darkest moments, and in that instant, something shifted. He started as a low growl from Fluffy, a sound deeper and more guttural than anything Alex had ever heard. The air grew cold. Kalen, sensing the change, tightened their grip on the rifle. Stay back, creature, they warned. Fluffy didn't listen. It stepped in front of Alex, shielding him. The armored plates on its back began to shift and separate, with a faint blue light glowing from the gaps. Its body seemed to unfold. It grew larger, its limbs stretching, its claws extending into wicked sickles. The small, playful creature was gone. In its place stood a being of terrifying power. But it wasn't the mindless monster from the Concordance. Videos. Its eyes, now glowing with an intense blue light, were fixed on Kalen with cold, calculated intelligence. This was a protector's fury. When Kalen fired, Fluffy moved with impossible speed. It didn't try to block the shot. It dodged, and with a single, targeted blast of plasma from its mouth, melted the rifle's power cell, rendering it useless. Kalen stared, shocked. Ravagers were brutes. They met force with overwhelming force. They didn't use tactical, disabling shots. Fluffy let out a roar that wasn't just sound, it was a physical force, a concussive wave that sent Kalen stumbling back. But it didn't press the attack. Instead, it used its powerful limbs to knock over a stack of containers, creating a wall between them and the bounty hunter. It wasn't trying to kill. It was controlling the battlefield. It was creating an escape. Kalen, a veteran of 100 hunts, who had faced apex predators on a dozen worlds, felt something they hadn't in a very long time, or mixed with a healthy dose of fear. This Ravager was different. It was fighting, not for bloodlust, but for the insignificant human cowering behind it. Fluffy, let's go, Alex yelled, having used the diversion to power up a small shuttle docked in the bay. His voice, the terrifying war form that was Fluffy, immediately disengaged. It turned, and in two powerful leaps, it was inside the shuttle. Alex slammed the ramp shut and fired the thrusters, rocketing out of the station just as the first massive warships of the Concordance battle group ripped through hyperspace, filling his view with their menacing silhouettes. They were fugitives. A lone human and the galaxy's deadliest creature in a tiny shuttle against an infinite, hostile darkness. The Concordance now had a confusing new entry in their Ravager file, an Omega-class entity that showed tactical thinking, controlled violence, and unheard of mercy. And with it, a new class of criminal, the human who had somehow tamed it. In the quiet of the shuttle's cockpit, the adrenaline started to fade. Alex's hands still shook on the controls. The creature beside him seemed to shrink, its armor retracting, its inner light dimming until it was once again just fluffy. It nudged its head against Alex's shoulder and let out that familiar, deep rumble. The purr of a content cat. Alex looked out at the endless sea of stars, at constellations that now seemed both beautiful and threatening. They were on the run, hunted by the most powerful authority in the galaxy. He had no plan, no destination, and no allies. But as he felt the warm, solid weight of his friend beside him, he didn't feel lonely anymore. In a galaxy that ran from the monster, one human decided to give it a home. Their journey is far from over. Now, fugitives, they have to navigate a cosmos that fears them, searching for a place where a man and his monster can finally live in peace. But that is a story for another time.